That should be the only for you here. If anybody's having trouble hearing the audio, please give me a holler. Wait. Well, that's just a good thing. You can't hear it. Really, you can't.
It's quite garbled.
Yeah, Mark is very garbled, I have to say.
Okay, we can try something else. How's that?
Much better.
That's better.
Those two words were excellent.
Right,
Okay, we're going with the owl. So,
that's perfect.
thank you.
Oh, yeah, these are awesome.
Those are from the borough president. That's from the borough president's office. That is from Beta NYC. If you take a meeting with them, you get an owl. So we'll be all.
All I did is another boost.
Oh,
Okay. I mean, so we have one.
yes, we've had 4 hours there.
Oh, that audio is.
Yeah, I'm sorry, is there a problem hearing me?
No, now it's good. I don't know. Maybe it's when more than one person is talking. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to be careful about that. Anyway, welcome everybody. This is CB2's June Executive Committee meeting. I am the chair, Susan Kent, and we do have quorum. So I will hope everybody has a copy of the agenda. Anyone here who needs a copy, there are available. And
I wanted to make one suggestion, since you guys are all in the room together. For the transcript won't show your names, so it might be helpful for the transcript if you identify your names before you speak, if you care.
okay, if everyone would just identify themselves before the first time they speak, and that will help. Thank you. So the first thing is the approval of the May Executive Committee minutes. I believe everybody has received them. Does anybody have any questions or issues with them?
Yeah, I'm gonna put that correction, it says like scooter issue, but it's just ADA and. I was on a correction, but it wasn't about scooter issue.
That's me. So then it's me.
Also, I thought they were excellent minutes, by the way, and you really summed up a lot of the important points about the public's participation that I brought up, so thank you for your diligence.
Any other comments or edits or anything? If not, can I have a motion to accept the minutes? Motion. Thank you, thank you.
Second.
Any days, any extensions, refusals? No, thank you. Okay, the minutes are accepted. Next thing is the chair's report. I want to spend this report dealing with some just technical and administrative matters.
Susan, can you get a little closer to the microphone?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And actually, can you run the line underneath your thing?
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully, little more room. Is that better? Not better.
This is not right.
It's the air conditioner? Okay, we're going to shut off the air conditioner.
I don't think it's the air conditioner personally. Maybe other people aren't having a problem, but
Now that it's off, how does it sound? Okay, I got one thumbs up.
yes, that's better.
I will take that. You know, I wanted first of all, go over our open meetings law requirements. I know this is difficult. It's not our doing, it is simply state law, and we have to adhere to it. It's become, of course, increasingly important because now that we've got this, if we attempt to do a hybrid meeting, it's like we have to be aware of what the requirements are. I want to be particularly clear. The presumption is that everybody is going to show up in person. This is not a situation where we simply count up, the number we need for quorum and everybody else gets to show up virtually. The presumption under the law is that people will be attending in person, and that unless they have an extraordinary circumstance that is appropriate to recognize that they're going to be remote, everyone is going to be in person. The one major exception to that is that anyone with an acknowledged disability can participate remotely and will count towards quorum. I want to point out that, what this is going to do, of course, this makes life harder on people. You're going to have, each chair is going to now have to pay more attention to the issue of whether or not the committee members are going to show up. You're going to simply have to reach out to people. And whereas up to now, people just logged in and you were okay. Now you're really going to have to make sure that you've got your quorum. And you may have to actually start making calls. I will also ask that each chair, in terms of, well, the office will be the first line in terms of making sure that we have adequate quorum for our board meetings. If we see that there's an issue, I'm going to turn to each committee chair and ask you to reach out to your committee members. And I think it's much more organized if each of you then attempts to track them down and find out what the story is. Hopefully, once we get into this process, people will be more forthcoming and proactive in terms of responding, but we really can't wait until the last minute. I'm sorry, yes, Valerie.
I don't want to know if you were ready for a comment.
Go ahead.
So what's our plan of action? For the short term, for the long term committee, for your committee meeting, you need to make sure you're gonna have a quorum ahead of time. Chairs, call your committee members, confirm, etc. But for the short term for Thursday, what are we doing to make sure? Because it looks pretty light.
You're right.
Is that something where should we?
We can apply it.
Yeah, should we have committee chairs reach out?
You're absolutely right. I do need the committee chairs to confirm. First of all, we do have a spreadsheet. To the extent that everyone should check that first, to the extent that there are people who have already responded, of course, you don't have to repeat. But please, you're going to have to reach out to your committee members and get an answer one way or another.
Are you talking about full board at this point?
Yes, I'm talking about Thursday.
Oh, okay, because I did not receive anything requesting any information about whether I'm attending or not.
Nor did I.
Okay. Nobody else, I'm pretty sure.
I sent,
We got it.
There's an email.
yeah, there's an email that went, last Thursday or Friday, right? I'll be glad to I'm looking up here. I'm looking.
Thank-
Here's the link without all the
Okay.
other.
Well.
Okay, yeah, there was a
That's
lengthy
what
email.
we're picking it up now, because the more time, more often it's repeated, the more likely people will catch it. Yeah, if we do not, unlike with a committee meeting, if you don't have a quorum, you can then still have whatever the committee's work, any resolutions can then be presented at full board. Obviously, if we don't have quorum on Thursday, then none of our resolutions are the official statements of CB2. And that's going to force us into a position where we may have to have an emergency meeting. And I'm sure nobody really wants. So this is really going to be an important issue. Yeah, Michael.
Question, excuse me, question about how we board members will be speaking live and in person into the microphone to make sure that what we say is heard by everyone who is tuning in online. So will there be a microphone passed around for us to speak if we raise our hands to be part of the discussion? We'll have questions on a resolution. I don't want to overdo this, but has that been worked out for Thursday night? Given that will be the first full board meeting that's live and in person, many of us will be there, but there will still be some people online. And of course, there will be non-board members online as well. How will we handle being able to all hear each other speak?
So the venue has two, we're entirely devoted or working off of their setup. So they have two handheld microphones that we will circulate as people speak, including when people from the public come up to speak and so forth. I'll be heading down there early on Thursday. I should look here, right? I'm sorry, I'm looking here so you see my ear. Very helpful. So I will go down there to help them arrange the room, so there'll be an alleyway for people to come up and speak. And there is the same microphone that helps people in the room hear what each other are saying, also populates or feeds into the Zoom, so it'll all work the same way.
Good, thank you. And why don't you wear your running shoes to make sure you can get around the space? Thank you, Mark.
I was thinking of rollerblades, but okay.
That's
Some-
fine.
Office are disposable microphone covers that Bob formally ordered. So you can also put a cover on the microphone when you speak to shield yourself from the germs from the previous speaker.
Okay, I may have to take them home and wash them, but.
No.
I know, but everything that I've been working, this room yesterday, the amount of dust, you don't want to know.
I'm sorry, did I see a hand up on the screen? No, okay, I thought I saw it.
I think Amy had.
But Amy?
I understand. So in the room, it's gonna be like it always was at every comparison meeting. That's it. It's just exactly the same. But there's all this technology behind the scenes tying it into the Zoom and all that.
Very similar, so the answer is basically yes, with this exception. The room is long and thin. The setup is very much like this one, where there is a camera, speaker, and the camera will follow you a little bit and so forth. But in order to get all of us, they have two rooms there, but this is the one that has the technology in it. So we opted for it, which means that it's a little bit of a close quarters. We're going to be a little cozy again. And it means that the person who wants to speak all the way at the end of the room probably will have to come forward or find a mic, or find me with a mic, to do that. So the answer is a qualified yes.
But quick question, are we going back to what we used to before where we voted after every resolution was presented, or are we staying with the omnibus?
I don't see a reason to change that.
That's fine. I just.
We need simplicity, and just so everybody knows, we are on a strict time limit. We need to conclude our meeting by 9:45, 9:55.
Cormac had a question.
I'm sorry.
I've got one. Will we have any sort of slideshow? Like, will there be a PowerPoint like before, when we were all remote at the beginning of meetings? Like a cover slide, and will people from and if anyone from the public during public session has something to share via a PowerPoint, will people in the room be able to see that in their projection screen?
Do we have that access?
So it's very similar to this. There'll be a screen, a TV screen like this. It might be a tad bit bigger, but the same basic idea. We are not allowed to hook our laptops or any of our equipment to their system with the exception of a thumb drive. So if somebody wants to come to the meeting and make a presentation, and looking at the agenda, I don't see anybody, at least on the resolutions that are before us, where that would be necessary. Unless you want to have the landmarks folks show the building they're talking about. But that's not our usual practice, right? Yeah, okay. So then the answer is, if somebody comes with a thumb drive and the chair wants that image to be seen, then I can make that happen. But otherwise, we will have what you saw when you walked into this room tonight.
If they can show any computer that's on the Zoom meeting, share the screen.
I'm sorry, so that's as long as
That's
we,
the work practice.
So something to share, as long as I have my laptop, I could share signs.
If you were participating via Zoom, that's correct.
Got it.
well, and I think,
You have to give them that, they have to have the right.
Is there Wi-Fi where we're gonna be?
My understanding is yes.
And then my second part of that would be for committee meetings. I know we're not gonna be in that room, but since we haven't had that discussion of for applications, such as for life or landmarks, so we do have that presentation element. How are we educating applicants on, are they bringing printed things for the people in the room? And then are we projecting? If they're in the room with a lot, will they be able to project?
Well, I think that first of all, I mean, certainly if you're able to, if that meeting to run out of here, then this you have all this equipment, there could be no problem. If a committee chooses not to use this facility, then they're going to have to deal with the issues of that facility. Hopefully, we should be able to run most of our committee meetings out of here, so we will have that. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to, if, we're gonna have it sharing the screen, I would suggest that there's like the host be gatekeeper on it and not just let everybody share on their own, because that can be very disruptive.
That's what normally
Yeah.
Okay,
All these technical things, we will certainly work it out. Anybody who has questions, we will take this offline. I really kind of want to deal with the big picture things right now. Go ahead.
So this is something important for everybody to keep in mind. Before COVID at our committee meetings, we often hardly met once, meeting by one or two people. And so when people think they have an option not to attend, it means we're most likely not going to have a forum. And this is sort of a reality that I don't think is communicated clearly to everybody. It's not like if you're late, you can't make it, we're most likely not gonna have a forum because other board members may not be able to make it otherwise, period, who could zoom in if they're out of town. So this is a challenge for those who, you know, were at a lot of the community meetings before COVID to keep in mind. So there's the option, if somebody's just not here, you know, that is a negative against forum, and we always have that problem. So people have to think about that because we're most likely in up a committee meetings without forum. People exercise that option of remote attendance, and it's just as somebody who's watched attendance and minutes of committees over time, it's an important consideration individually if we think of ourselves, you know, the huge impact that could have on the smaller committees.
As I had said earlier, remote attendance is not an option. It's not a default option. It's something that you ask for in extraordinary circumstances. The law uses extraordinary, but a compelling need for it. The one exception to that is someone who has an acknowledged disability. And I wanted to make a point about this. If you ask for a disability exemption, if the committee chair is asked for a disability exemption, first of all, the presumption I think you should take is that if somebody's asking for it, they have a legitimate disability. You may ask for a general explanation of what that is, so that if you are asked, that you are aware that they have some sort of disability and it's not a favor that's being given because they don't want to be there, but there's a reason. At the same time, you should not be asking for any detailed information on their medical condition. You should not be, certainly not asking for any documentation or proof. And if somebody pushes back, if somebody, whether it's in the public or otherwise, you have difficulty and somebody says, I don't believe that person, you send them to me. We have to, while we take the word of our people seriously, at the same time, and respect their privacy, at the same time, we have to balance the interests. Yeah.
What about like for illness, like if you're very, very sick for that particular meeting? Is that just absent, or can you have like a temporary condition that still allows you to be part of the forum?
It's my understanding that an illness, like say you have the flu.
Yeah.
That is not a disability. A disability, there is, well, broadly construed, a physical, mental, or medical impairment prevents the exercise of a normal bodily function. Now, I will, having looked this up, New York State is more generous than the ADA, but And yes, it's possible to have a disability that emerges for a period of time and then disappears for a time, but it is more than an illness. But of course, an illness would be a reason why you would be participating remotely, even if you don't count towards quorum, exactly. But in the sense that we do need to keep a separate record of somebody who is attending remotely versus, due to a disability versus someone who's just attending remotely. But just be sensitive. Well, when you're counting towards it, you could make a note of that so that the record reflects that you actually had quorum, even if people attending in person don't count up the right number of bodies. You have to be able to say, oh no, I had 2 people online with disabilities and we did meet quorum. So yes, if you may ask for a general reason, but no, you do not have access to their very personal records.
So can we offline, so we know if it takes them a meeting, let's talk about how you want to reflect that in the attendance
Absolutely, that's fine.
later.
Yeah.
She can be away from that because everybody has to come before board. It keeps it.
It should, yes, it should come to me, if this is. I think people are first going to approach the chair, but yes, ultimately, you're right. It really should, if you find that somebody is got that request, you should send them to me, because we do need to keep a record.
Yeah, also wanted to ask if we were gonna be able to report back as, our decision makers, how things go, so that we reflect what the reality and complexity that, we live in a world of COVID over, so it's not okay to say, yes, we're gonna meet and then not reflect that there is a problem.
Oh, no, that's why.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, I think you have to talk directly into the microphone, because what happens is that there's a delay for the microphone to pick you guys up if you're not really close to it.
But if you step,
You just paraphrase.
Only a format.
Sure, I mean,
I believe what Ivy is saying is that she wants to know if we report, I guess, whether it's to the borough president's office or anyone else, the idea that there's a complexity out there that has to do with people now having to be remote, and that, I'm sorry.
we report as we're rolling it out, like us coming back, and what the challenges are.
Yeah,
Because, because I know the rules were done before COVID, but now it's different, and I think we should reflect that so that down the line, there's opportunities making available the change maybe that to benefit, that one of the benefits where more people can participate. So
did everyone hear that?
Oh, no.
Ivy wants us to share with, whether it's the borough president's office or anyone who's in a decision-making position, make them aware of the complexities that we're dealing with in terms of now, assembling our meetings, running our meetings, including even the difficulties that we have finding locations to have our meetings. It is as hard as it was pre-COVID, it has gotten a lot harder. We have fewer places that will accept us for meetings. The expectations in terms of accessibility have gone way up. And now we have all of this administrative preparation that has to be done in order to comply with the law. Yes.
Can we go over when votes count, when you're remote versus not,
Okay.
for committee and full board?
You first have to take a vote to make sure, you have to take a head count to make sure you have a quorum. Once you have quorum, then everybody who is in attendance. Physical plus your disabled people
Okay.
online. Once you have that number, everyone who's in attendance whether they are remote or fit or present, can vote and should be treated as present. So that's how it's going to work. Now, the rules of quorum don't change. It's, 50% plus one, and once you have quorum, quorum remains. Unless you take a vote, unless somebody reveals that it has. That hasn't changed.
Unless what?
Unless somebody then challenges your quorum, and then you would have to take a vote you would have to then do a head count to verify that you still have the quorum. Yes, Michael?
Did I understand you're saying that all committee meetings would not occur in our board office? What would occur in this facility because of the better technological setup? Is that correct? So all committee meetings would be in the facility and not in our board office? Am I correct?
The opposite, Michael. The goal is to have as many committee meetings as possible in this office because it is set up. And we can guarantee access to it for as long as the committee would need it.
I'm sorry, which office are we talking about?
The conference room.
Oh, I got it.
But there may be committees that are anticipating a large turnout. That
I
may
understand.
choose to have it elsewhere. And then
Okay, I got that. I misunderstood it first. I understand it now. Thank you.
okay, yes, Shirley.
Now, a question about technical capacity. I'm trying to understand within the hybrid meetings, will there still be transcripts? And
Yes.
will there be, and attendees, the names of attendees? How will that work? Because there'll be some in person and some online. I mean, our guests will be online for the most part.
We'll have the names of attendees because they will be.
Thank you, hon.
That you will be able to access. As was mentioned, it would be advisable first time somebody speaks to announce their name. That will also help us, but there's going to be an attendance list that you can always refer to.
Ruben's calling you.
Yes.
Frederica, can you mute? Frederica, you need to mute.
Sorry, I didn't get it about the guests.
We're not doing the mic. For the transcript, I think that this is gonna be part of the.
You can't.
No,
Kate echoed.
So, yeah. I can't interrupt the meeting to do that right now. If you want to deal, maybe if there. But I can't do this right now.
It will create the same echo.
It's an echo. That will create an echo. Let me just get through the people who are on the screen first. Okay, Shirley.
Yeah.
The technology, I'm sorry, please continue.
No, my question, that was my simple question about transcripts and how we can record the attendees. I guess we have to work that out, right?
Well, you're talking about the attendees online or where there are names?
Both. No, well, online, will they be just recorded as they have been online?
Your name is there and anybody who's in person is going to be on an attendance list.
Yeah, but in a transcript used to identify everybody because every little Zoom square has a name on it. Now,
Right.
everyone who's in one room will have no identification. So if the transcript is to have any value, you really have to say your name carefully before you say anything else.
So we'll have to really clarify that to our guests, that they must say their names.
Yes, go ahead.
Valerie Della Rosa. So will there be an Eventbrite for every committee meeting and are applicants going, is each committee going to decide whether or not applicants will be in person or remote?
That is something that the committee will decide. The committee chairs have discretion over how they want to run their meetings. They want it to be fully in person. It will be a fully in-person meeting.
Follow up to the things, we don't have a sign-in sheet tonight, every meeting needs a sign-in. And number two, you can't create a transcript that identifies everybody using an outside service, and I think that the amount of work for what you've become accustomed to, Shirley and Susanna, with the transcripts, If you use a service like Otter or something else, if the board gets it, it actually goes by voice recognition, not by who speaks. And it's actually very good and it can be trained by voices. So it's a way that actually, if it's important to committees, that's a separate technical discussion that should happen. Because you will spend hours trying to decipher who said what in the transcript without the video, et cetera. But if we pay the service, you know, for whatever their fee is, your time, I think, is more valuable than trying to figure it out. But all the meeting audio can be recorded as we go on Otter, and it will identify all the speakers. So I know everybody's become reliant on that, and it's really important. But that is a tech issue that is, you guys bringing it up, that is paramount, right? It's you guys creating the meeting minute. So it's something that we really do need to explore, I think. For precisely the reasons you're bringing it up.
One more example of how things are done harder. Yes, Shamal?
Two things. One, in watching tonight and how it's gone, it is very important that everyone remotely keep microphones off. Because the least noise can knock us away from the chair when the chair is presiding or whatever's happening on the screen. The other is, and the discussion about the people who are temporarily sick. We shouldn't lose track of that we want people to come if they can remotely, if they can't be there, even though they're not excused in that way. And there's a provision for that. Is that
Yeah.
not correct? A person is away, for example.
Look, as I said, people who, if somebody does, just because somebody doesn't qualify as having a disability, doesn't mean they cannot participate remotely. They will not count towards the quorum. But once we have quorum, then everyone who is in attendance, who is a member of a committee or the board, will then be counted as present. Then you are able to fully participate. So if you are out of town, but you want to participate remotely, once you have to wait until we verify quorum, then you're able to participate.
Participate means speaking and voting?
It's a full participation.
Okay.
It is the only thing that you cannot count for is quorum. So that is also why it's really important, because once you have the quorum, everything goes normal. If you don't have the quorum, then we're like in trouble.
And one more question in respect to a committee meeting. If some people are on, let's use the vacation as the easy example. Are those persons' votes recorded and it's noted that that this is how the person's view, but it's not part of the tally?
If you are present, if you're eligible to vote because you're on the committee, then your vote is your vote. The only question is whether or not you have the quorum. Once you have the quorum, all votes are the same.
Ah, I understand. Okay.
Quorum is a preliminary threshold. Once you reach it, everyone is treated the same.
Thank you.
Yes, you do.
Could I just as a refresher understand what happens in a committee meeting if the quorum threshold is not met? Do we then hold the meeting as usual with the exception of the vote? Is there a way for us to still meet and hear applications? Or if we do not meet quorum, what happens then? And I realize this isn't anything new.
It isn't any.
So I just want to refresher what happens if we don't meet quorum.
It is. Okay, what's going on? It isn't anything new. From time to time, committees haven't had quorum. They would still conduct business, they would still discuss resolutions, they would still take votes. However, because there's no quorum, there's no official position of the committee. So what happens is that whatever they produce is then presented to the board as new business. And then it gets to. That's what's going on.
Gotta go. Sorry.
Okay, Eugene, you're gonna have to go, okay, thank you, I think that's better. Yes, and then it's presented as new business, and then it is discussed, debated, et cetera, and then it's voted on. So ultimately, there's always that backup, should it happen. But if it starts becoming a regular problem in any committee, then we're gonna have to examine that committee and determine what's going on there. If any of your members push back and say, I shouldn't have to be here in person, I need to know about that, because that goes directly to their service on the board. This is just, it is just the way it is. If somebody, whether it's because they don't believe that they should have to do it, or they simply have other commitments that make it unfeasible, we have to know about that. We can't keep going through this process of always fighting to get far.
And is it not the case also that, as we've done in the past, if there is not a quorum, still a, if you will, a survey is taken of those there, and that's used to help enlighten the board about how the members there felt about it, as what we're discussing. We've done that before.
Since the vote will not be valid, they can't take a vote, so is a summary of the survey.
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah, you can't take a vote, but you certainly can provide the opinions of the committee members. You can certainly, flesh out issues so that if something is then presented as new business, the board members have then seen some of the work that's done, some of the reasoning behind the resolutions and everything. Yeah, it doesn't count, and there's nothing official, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't hold your meetings.
And know how people feel about it.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. That's changed.
And relate it.
Okay, yes, Cormac.
I do understand how important this issue is, but it does feel like we've covered a lot, and I just want to point out we're 40 minutes in the meeting. Should we be moving on?
I actually, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, yes.
John, I'm Rachel speaking. Do people have to have their cameras on?
Okay, that's my next thing. Thank you very much. It's the one more thing that I wanted to bring up with regards to the open meetings law. For a person who is participating online, whether you have a disability exemption or you're simply participating remote, your camera must be on all, or at least significantly all of the time. If you're not, then you can be determined not to have been present. I'm not talking about situations where people turn them off for 2-3 minutes to step away. I'm not talking about situations where people are having technical difficulties or bandwidth issues that create problems. But the default is that you have to have your camera on. Otherwise, not only can somebody say this person wasn't present, it can be a basis for challenging quorum. If somebody has a problem with that, I need to know about it. Again, that goes to the question of whether or not you're actually participating. And it's a basic question. Yes, Frederica.
Thank you. I think a lot of the things that you're talking about have to do with, personally speaking, me getting lazy about attending a meeting. So there's a different pace after COVID than there was before. Before COVID, we were willing to sit in the room, listen to the electeds, go on the public. Now I feel there's a little bit more pressure to make the meeting more efficient, because speaking personally, in the last hour, it was really nice to switch into pajamas. Now we can't do that. But, we need to put the emphasis more on efficiency and moving the meeting forward.
I agree. And on that note, I want to move it forward.
Okay, good, very good. Thank you.
Discussing with each of the committee chairs in your meetings, you need to think about materials that are brought to your meeting. Because we've all been at home with our own computers, you've had access to materials. If you're meeting in person, you don't have that option anymore unless you bring your own device or it's figured out. Each committee has different ways they do things. It needs to think about that, but we may go back to requiring applicants to bring materials, or does the board office print them out, or what happens, but that needs to be thought about before. So everybody has a plan, and this is the only time the committee chairs gather to talk about it. So that's an important consideration, because if you end up, I've been, having chaired a committee for a long time, I've been through a lot of things where stuff hasn't happened. And the disruption it causes, undermining the whole reason everybody gets together, it needs to be considered every time to make sure there's a plan. And it's not complicated, just somebody has to do it each time, because it's different. And you can't just send out a quick email if somebody doesn't have a device to look at it.
Yes, Susanna.
I wanted to raise something not about open meetings. Is this an okay time to do that? It's a strategic question. I wanted to request if the board, if the office could produce a document that shows when everybody's term limits are up. A lot of us have been on this board for a long time, and at a certain point, we're all going to be gone. And I think it's important now to look at what our what our weaknesses are going to be when everybody leaves. We've had a lot of new blood, which is really, really great. But I think that once we look realistically at who's going to be gone in 4 years or 3 years or whatever it is, I think it's 4 years, we'll have a clearer sense of where our weaknesses are going to be. And that, I think, will inform how you strengthen the committees so that the new blood becomes more authoritative and so on and so forth. I just really start to worry about it as I start my whatever, second to last term or whatever it is.
Pretty much everybody at this point has got 3 or 4 more years. And that's a perilous situation for this board. Right? I mean, we got 4 years to make everybody who's new become an expert. So we just have to really think strategically about that.
Agreed.
Excuse me, we're going to get back to the one other item that I have to talk about, which directly relates to our chairs, and that's the whole problem we've had with our calendars. Some months we simply have more meetings than we have available days. And the idea, and we've even had midnight days when we've had to double up. This is now going to stop. I'm going to have the goal, first of all, we need to get back to the goal of having committees meet to, at the extent possible, on the same nights of the week. It is increasingly unrealistic to ask people to make their schedules around committee meetings when the committee meetings keep moving around. People cannot plan their lives. And as we're seeing is that planning is becoming just harder and harder. So the expectation is going to be that we're going to keep these on to the extent of the same days. What I've done is look at our committees and basically broken, they come down into 2 categories. There are the ones that are the application driven, and then there are the ones that are topic driven. The application ones, we know, have to basically meet every month, and those have to be put on the calendar first. The topic driven ones seem to have more trouble, not in all cases, but scheduling their agendas sufficiently in time so that what happens is that what I've been seeing is that committees are getting put on the calendar without an agenda, without a plan. And now we're going to reverse that. Now, if you want to be on the calendar, you have to present some sort of agenda. It doesn't mean it has to be a finalized agenda, but I need to know that there's something there that merits putting you on the calendar. Because what's happening is that these days are being taken away. It's preventing other committees that might need them. And then what I'm seeing is that the days are then just canceled at the last minute, which is also then affecting we're now seeing committees that, we're seeing very lopsided. Some committees we're having members that aren't really attending meetings at the same rate that we have attending committees that are meeting monthly. To further, but to be fair, because there is this planning process, I don't think it's realistic to ask some of these topic-driven committees to say that you have to meet every month. What I've been seeing is that committees have been putting themselves on the calendar. There's a rush to try to create some sort of an agenda. Things don't coalesce, and then it gets canceled. I think it is much more realistic, and so 50% of the time, you end up with all of these cancellations. It's much more realistic to say, no, you're going to present an agenda, and then you put you on the calendar, and the goal is not to meet every month. The goal is to maybe meet every other month. Of course, this will depend upon the level of activity based on your respective, area. There's the area that you cover. If you run a committee and you feel there's a lot going on, and you need to meet every month or most every month, then we will get you on the calendar. If you feel that you're doing a better job by meeting every other month, and we can project forward and develop a series of agendas down the road. And what I'm talking about is not working from agenda to agenda, but starting the process of developing a series of ideas that you will then be developing over time. Then you can meet every other month. What this will also allow us to do is then schedule, have a day for every meeting without having to have the doubling up, without having to have that last week that's between board and the following month always being booked. And it will leave us time, it will leave us those open days if somebody has to run an emergency meeting. Which, considering that quorum, is going to be a concern, may be something we have to keep space for. So the plan is now to shift this around, and hopefully it will make life more realistic for our chairs. By all means, one of the things you should be doing is not struggling with these agenda ideas on your own. This is what your committee members are there for, is to help you come up with the ideas, flesh out the ideas, work as a unit so that you're producing something that's actually going to, hopefully pull in the community on subjects of interest. Susanna had a.
Oh, I was actually just on your topic. I mean, my committee is primarily topic driven. And I feel like I should just offer myself up for any time that you need my date. If you give me, I can fill up my dates. Certainly, we have plenty to talk about, but I can double things up. I can skip a month. And I think that you guys should just think of social services as a, what's it called, like a release point. You can ask me to not have a meeting. That's okay.
It's not about asking you not to. It's about you determining whether or not there is sufficient material to run a meeting on any given schedule, whether if there's a lot of activity in the area of human services, and you're going to say, I'm going to have a meeting each month for the next few months because there's just so much going on, that's what you should be doing. If things
Yeah, but
are,
I could, like, for example, I have a meeting scheduled with the Salvation Army at the end of June, with LHGV at the end of July. I can do those meetings. I'm always looking for agendas, but I can also compress them if you need the date. I can move one down,
then why not do that? But at the same time, there are other committees that don't have there's not as much activity going on. And it's better that they engage in more planning and do it and skip the occasional one.
Okay.
Yeah, Valerie.
Could you kind of tell us what does that look like in practice? If, should I, let's say, as a topic driven, should I bring my agenda, let's say, for the July executive meeting in order to earn my spot in August or earn my spot in September? I have to come to you with my agenda items to earn my spot on the calendar. confirm.
When we go around in the sense of when we talk about the calendar, don't say, oh, I want that, a date, it's an open date. I have an agenda, I
And it's
need a
this,
date.
And it's X, Y, Z.
And it doesn't, and it might, depending on how developed it is, you might have something that you're pulling together within a short period of time. And it's like, oh, can you get me on the calendar next month? But if it's something that you need more time for planning and coordinating, it's like, I'm not looking at next month, I'm looking at the month after. And the more you can do that, the more, and I would strongly recommend that if, for example, if you have two good agendas, one may be, unless there's some sort of time sensitivity, you'll plan one for a month or two out. You may plan one for 3 or 4 months out. But this will give you the lead in time, this will give you the coordination time, this will give you the flexibility that if something changes, you know, if your speakers have to cancel on you, then all of a sudden, you know, you're not in a tough spot.
Yeah, the only caveat is that every year by October, we need to put forth our priority budget requests and our, you know, our district needs statement, and that is a time issue.
That is true. But the longer the time frame that we're thinking about, the easier it is to work towards that. And Susanna brings up a very good point, that budget is something that it will really help our topic-driven committees to think about, because that will both give you ideas of things that you may want to address, and at the same time, it gives you a direction in terms of where you want to take an agenda item. So I compliment you, you do an excellent job in terms of, structuring things around that, around the budget process. Yes, Shirley.
Yeah, two things. One, I guess that we could kind of work around this just in these executive committee meetings. To talk about what maybe we should set up some kind of protocol for us to bring our agendas to the meetings, to the executive committee meetings, as one possibility.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that if you like in a month where you haven't had a meeting, there's nothing for you to talk about, but you can bring your agenda, and by sharing it with the other members of the other executive committee members, you can get feedback.
Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is just my own committee. Sometimes it's topic-based and sometimes it's requests. For instance, we have 2 requests in July, possibly a third one. You don't want to hold up people. You also want to give them a specific date so they can organize themselves to be able to attend the meeting. So a lot of this has to really be done. Well, it's better to have a meeting night that you can tell people. That kind of thing.
So I'm just gonna be really simple and straightforward. So everybody who comes to the executive committee meeting who's a chair to come with an agenda and say, in July, this is what I want, I need this date, or I don't need it in July, but I'm gonna have this agenda in August. That's where it happens. You bring your agenda, it's discussed at the meeting, and it's decided, right?
Well, you don't have to decide, you don't look to us to decide your agenda, but in order to get on the calendar.
No, I'm not saying you're asking people for input on your agenda, but you come to the executive committee meeting that month with your agenda and you say, I would like a date in August for this event.
Right.
You can't just say, I want a date in August and I might have something.
Right.
That's it. That's basically it, right?
That's
Okay,
it.
got it.
That's the goal.
And the overall goal is so that when the month calendar goes out, it's all with agenda items. There's no,
That's right.
There's
That's
no
another
blank.
problem
There's
we've
no
been having. Our calendars are going out without agendas. And how do you expect community to respond to your meetings and be interested in showing up if they don't know what they're showing up for?
Right, although those of us who have meetings at the very end of the month might have an issue with that, but we'll work with it.
We will always work this out. This is a goal. This is a sort of a reorientation, and believe me, yes, there will be things, I mean, I'm happy to talk to each and every one of you individually if you, if I can give help.
So, Susan, so the idea is when we had a paper calendar and it went out at the beginning of the month, you could always take something off, but you could never have, you know, generally speaking. So you can always take off the topic, but that's the cutoff. Because now we can resend it. That's the shift that's happened. And it's been a slow shift. To sending the calendar out multiple times a month when it used to go out once.
Right.
With everything on there.
Look, nothing is also set in stone. Things change. The availability of your speakers change. Something comes up that is extremely time sensitive, or you really want to respond to it, you shift things around. It's okay, that's reality. But the general orientation is now going to be towards developing your agendas. And that will, you know, it's so much easier for us to help you get the right days if we know what we're working. Okay, that I think is something for people to think about, and I think I've spent quite enough time. So I'm going to turn it over to Mara.
Okay, and because of that, the discussion, half of my update has now been covered as well, so you get 2 for 1 tonight. A couple of things though about Thursday night in particular, and Carter anticipated me perfectly on this, which is I recommend that you bring your laptop, tablet, or other device with your board package on it or print it out. But if you want the board office to print one for you, we're glad to do that. I just am mindful of the fact that our board package runs somewhere around 50 pages, give or take. It's the over under. I don't want to print and schlep things that no one needs. I do anticipate we are trying to dust off those tablets that I understand in years past had the board package on it. Florence has spent the day adding juice to them, so hopefully we can get them to work. Stay tuned for that, but we believe that that's going to be an option for at least 24 of you. So hard copy is an option, your laptop's an option, our tablet is an option. Let's see, we talked about all of that. In terms of just a coda to, I think it's clear from what was just discussed, but to the extent that meetings take place in person, there needs to be some kind of sign-in or recording of who was present, because Zoom no longer will do that for us. Skipping down, we covered all the rest of that, other than, as the chair mentioned, we anticipate that this room will be the venue for committee meetings, except those that have an expectation of high attendance, either high attendance because of board members or high attendance because of applicants and or the public. If you think that your meeting fits that category, please contact me offline and we'll do our best to get you someplace that works. Our challenge is that we have more needs for space than we did pre-COVID and fewer options, at least for the summer. So we may be getting a little cozy here in this room for a while with the hope that more options will come our way in the after the summer. Switching gears to the budget. I'm sorry, one more thing. There were some questions about whether or not open meetings law ought to operate the way that it is operating, and the chair outlined exactly how it is operating. If anybody is moved to do that, I would keep in mind 2 things. One is that it's the state electeds who set the open meetings law. They tried to revise it. Actually, one of our state senators worked hard to try to revise it, and all that came of it was the disability exception that the chair mentioned earlier. So it's a state law, therefore the state legislature has to amend it if it's going to be amended. But it's the local electeds who are going to provide us with whatever material we may need to make it work under the current regime. So we'll be pressing on both fronts. And if you haven't have a thought on that, that's where you go. Switching now gears to the fiscal year end. I have just succeeded in transferring as much money as they possibly would let me to put into a fund from which we can buy things. It's in a fund where we can buy equipment, and anticipating buying the equipment needed for our traveling roadshow, so we can open up more venues for the hybrid in person and Zoom. And my hope is that we have a solution from B&H Audiovisual that'll work. It'll take the entire New York Giants linebacking core to carry it from room to room. So I'm trying to find a better, more manageable solution. My orthopedist will endorse me in that. If anybody has any other purchases in mind, especially capital purchases that you think the board needs or that would facilitate your work, please contact me offline. We'll talk about it. I'll see what the budget can hold. But we want to spend all this money by June 30th. And as I understand the rules, we not only have to place the order by June 30th, we have to actually receive the goods in-house by June 30th. I don't know, I haven't been here long enough to know if anybody is owed any reimbursements, but if you are, please make sure that I know about it again before June 30th so I can process those. Couple of quick updates. We seem to have cracked the code on being a consulting party for the 5G Link NYC towers. They think they sent us a letter in April. No one who draws breath has ever seen this letter. I now have the letter and I've shared it with Will and with the chair and with Chenault and those people who might be involved, and we'll ramp up on that. There are that same transmittal confirmed what we believe to be the case, that there are only 3 locations so far identified for our district. They are 100 Jane Street, 100 Horatio Street, and 445 West Street, which I think might be West Ave. And that's it for now. Doesn't mean there will be more. A bit of tonight's bit of trivia with a hello to Darlene who's listening on Zoom. We had a question about after-hours variances, which is a pet peeve of mine because it disturbs all kinds of things. There was a very late after-hours variance from the MTA, and I have learned finally after quite a bit of research that after-hours variances that involve MTA matters do not go through the city Department of Buildings or any other city. They do it because states can do it. So the answer, that's the answer. So if there's an MTA related after-hours variance, there's not a lot that we as a board can do about it. I think I'll stop there. And if there's anything that anybody needs or anybody has questions for me, I am, of course, at your disposal.
Oh, okay, we have a review of the June calendar. Is there anything July? I'm sorry, July. Thank you. See, that was an error on the agenda. All right.
Oh, did I screw that up? Sorry about that. That's
okay.
me.
Does anybody have anything that's on there that's not, school's not meeting?
For fiscal area speaking, school will not meet in July.
Okay, one down.
Economic development, the Valley de la Rosa Economic Development will not meet in July.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Landmarks is good and the standard.
Excellent.
Human Services has a topic, and if you need the date, I'll discuss it when it's my turn to talk about the committee, but you can, if you need the date, you'll let me know.
You got it, don't worry. Okay, Eugene.
Land use, we currently don't have any applications, so for July, I don't think we will be meeting.
Okay.
July 12th.
And then, I'm sorry. Shirley?
Yeah, July 6th is fine for me, and I presume we will have to share the office with SLA, TNG and SLA, and I could do our meeting early, which we've done before when we've shared online. So
I think SLA meets here. SLA.
No, we only have one Zoom. That's the issue.
Well, for SLA is going to be meeting in person, they're not doing hybrid, so he will not be zooming.
oh, you're doing it in person. So then I do hybrid with our committee in the office. That's okay. I mean, I just want to know what time. I can do it earlier if you need, the 6:30 data. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, SLA, and I don't know what the agenda item also causes a problem. So if they could do it earlier. I'm unfortunately, I do not have a calendar.
Would you
Okay.
like to know our agenda items? I'm not hearing this clearly is all that. We have 2 agenda items. I could have a third as well, but that can be put off if it's necessary to share that evening.
Start earlier, could you start like a half an hour earlier? Is that what we're talking about? I guess not, the agenda, well, what I'm trying to do is.
Are you on both committees?
That's the problem, right, it's on both committees.
On traffic? On traffic?
I'm not hearing what you're saying.
No, it's fine because SLA meets in person. There is no problem. You can come in here at 6:30.
Oh, okay, so we can keep in our time for 6:30. I was just offering to do it earlier if you needed it.
Not a
6:30.
problem, not a problem. Yes, Mark.
In other words, SLA is meeting somewhere else. Is that it?
That's correct. It's fully.
Okay, now I understand. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, yes, Mark.
So cannabis licensing is not meeting in July. And ERJ is not meeting in July because I have no topic, but I will release the day. And if that changes, I will let you guys know that I then am seeking a day. Does that work for scheduling?
Okay. Yep, that works.
Great.
So we now have that list of the committees that are not meeting. Okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, what have we got next? Now what we have is, oh, actually, that was not something, the communication policies is not something that I was going to. Well, actually, we should probably adopt it. Yes, Valerie.
Do we have an agenda item for arts and institutions?
July. Are you
know
the
the date?
Well, I haven't been able to, so I have a date that I cleared, with you and Mark. I just pulled it into my meet. Tuesday for the group, because we were gonna, the meeting with Mark.
But I will need something quickly. And August. Look at August. Which is a lot, which is our light month, it's usually only the committees that have applications.
Economic development, Valerie Delarosa, economic development is not meeting in August, it's not meeting in.
That's what I was, I'm assuming if someone correct me, if you do not have applications that must be heard in August, you will not be meeting in August, is that correct? I think that is always the default, let's make it
Perfect.
fast. So that's the only things that should be on the calendar for August. And then we will deal with, I think that's enough for now.
Off to.
No, oh, that's another thing, for anybody who's not aware. Executive is the replacement, well, it's not a replacement, but since we do not have a full board meeting in August, just to remind everybody, executive is where we hear all of the resolutions of the committees that meet in August, and we vote on them. Of course, because it is only the committee and not the board, it is not technically an official position of the board. All of these resolutions then have to be ratified at our September meeting, but that's how we handle them, so that we can at least provide some guidance to the extent that these applications, that they go with some opinion of our committees. SLA, I thought was meeting on the first and the on our, okay, and it's on this calendar for the 8th.
Okay, I'll fix it.
Okay, we will correct. Any other corrections for August? Okay, great. I'm sorry, Shirley, thank you.
Yeah, I just have a question about meeting places. And I remember that NYU used to be very generous about providing space. Just wondered where they stand now.
We will not have access to NYU space until fall.
Okay,
We've been talking to them. They have sort of come around, but we cannot expect any space from them until sometime in the fall.
Okay.
The. I don't have a copy. Communications policies was not something I planned to vote on here, actually, it was just for new business for the full board.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so forget that. Let's go to committee reports, landmarks.
We had a record-breakingly small meeting with a very large application. 277 Canal Street. It is the northeast corner of Canal Street and Broadway. And it's a very peculiar situation here because the buildings in general along Canal Street belong to Canal Street and have little or nothing to do with Soho. And because Canal Street's a big street, that's where the line got drawn for the landmark district. This is a building that was built as a theater, 3 stories. The bottom floor is now a regular commercial space with show windows. And this is an application for a 9-story addition with a penthouse that is to be 100 units with 25 affordable units. It essentially makes this building into a Soho building because of its height. And they've done a rather good job of making it an amalgamation of respecting the lower floors of the building and at the same time making it relate to the Broadway corridor. It's extensive. One can read the resolution, and in the end, it was approved. And another we didn't hear, and we'll hear at the next meeting. That's it.
Thank you. Land use. No, was it Katie and Eugene?
Katie's talking.
I can.
I'll unmute and Eugene can correct. He's correct. Eugene, please correct me if I make a mistake. So we had 3 items. We heard 3 items. The first one was a report from about 388 Hudson Street, and the report came from HPD, the Department of Housing Preservation, DEP, Environmental Protection, Parks, and City Planning. And they went through the timeline of their community engagement process, the RFP. We've seen the timeline before, but it's a little bit more refined. They discussed their community engagement process. But I would say thank you to the community board because they are taking our position and resolution very seriously and looking more, maybe creatively, imaginatively, extensively at how they can expand the building envelope and create more affordable housing. And they do seem to be talking to each other, and I think that's all because of what we've done. So pat ourselves on the back, and we can't give up. We got to keep going. Eugene and I are talking to HPD on a regular basis, every 2 or 3 weeks, and maybe in August we'll have another update. There will be put on your calendar July 27th. They tentatively have scheduled an in-person meeting at 75 Morton Street as part of their community engagement, and sometime in September there will be a virtual meeting. Parks, I think it's Parks. Parks will also have some meetings in the fall about the open space portion of the lot, and there will be community involvement in that meeting as well. Councilmember Botcher attended the meeting at least for a little while, and we're just keep pressing ahead. But there's no resolution on that, just notes. Next, we heard Villa Moscone, which is on McDougal Street, and they're asking for an extension of their variance. They've had a variance that was put in place in 2002, and another one 10 years later, 2013, and they're coming back for those were both for 10 years, and they've come back, asked for 2020 or without term. There was an issue because their lawyer couldn't join us for our May meeting. Mark attended virtually the BSA hearing on this, and the BSA is waiting for our answer. The committee has voted unanimously to request a 10-year extension. We feel that anything above 10 years is not a good precedent. We just granted a 10-year extension to another establishment. We want to be consistent and hold the line on that. We also have a resolution on the City of Yes, the carbon neutrality piece. Thank you, William Benesh. He's on this line, and I recently met a friend of his, so that's been fun, getting to know Will in new ways. And there are 17 categories in this element of the proposal. There are a number of other proposals part of the City of Yes, but this is carbon neutrality. And out of the 17,
Sorry, 17 proposals.
Sorry,
17 proposals, 4 categories.
Okay, thank you. But, well, hello. Oh, okay. But maybe as many as a half a dozen don't really apply to us. So, but we are unanimously supporting the carbon neutrality, having raised some concerns along the way, particularly because things that are being proposed, solar panels, reinforcing buildings, there are landmarks issues involved. We know that there are also maybe some traffic and transportation issues, quality of life issues, and parks may have something. But land use is taking the lead on it and pointing out other committees that may have weigh in. But there are going to be more. There are going to be more documents on this in this program, and some of them will be about maybe more appropriate for economic development. So we're not done with this issue. The City of Yes is a big proposal, and we'll be working on it for some months as a board. Eugene, is there anything that that you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the HPD update was a great one. And, we'll expect that we'll have continued engagement with them. I do want to point out that the timetable that they provided they've extended their calendar. So initially we had said that they were moving way too quickly for our comfort. They had initially wanted to issue the RFP as soon as this summer. And so they have definitely taken that into account and slowed things down significantly in the beginning steps of this. And so we have a lot more breathing room in order to help shape the guidance toward, getting an RFP issued that is to the best interest of the community and also helps to maximize the affordable housing unit. So already we've seen a definite some give from them in terms of the maximum number of units that are available. And there's also a third alternative they're still presently exploring with relation to some tricks that they can do in terms of zoning that could potentially squeeze some more units out of that site.
Thank you.
Thank you. Frederica?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great report, Katie and Eugene. Thank you very much. My concern is that if HPD is going to have a meeting in July, end of July, and if we don't meet in July or August, that we might fall behind their schedule. So just want to be sure that, that they don't steal a march on us and that we stay current with them. Also, on June 13th, there was an information session for the City of Yes Economic Opportunity and the Economic Opportunity Zoning Text Amendment. And I wondered if the two of you thought it might be useful to give some consideration to a multi-committee approach to that zoning text amendment. It was very, very helpful to have Will on board for this, but perhaps we want to make it even more structured for the Economic Opportunity Zoning Text Amendment, because that has some things in it that would really affect us. And the last thing on my mind, I don't know where it would go, but I wish that when we meet on Thursday, we could start with a moment of silence for Zella Jones.
Yes, I will certainly thank you for that, but I will, it's already expected.
On your mind, thank you so much. Great.
Right. Okay. Valerie De La Rosa, on City of Yes, I know Katie's mentioned, and it's on my list to connect with Eugene and Katie offline about the next round on economic opportunity. It looks like DCP will be referring to that to the board in October, and then the 60-day period will start. So that's on my list to reach out to Katie and Eugene on that and see how it can best assist them on.
Yes.
Yeah, Will Benish. Just wanted, thanks Katie and Eugene again for all the work on the City of Yes carbon neutrality. Since I couldn't be at the entire meeting, I just wanted to double check. Were there any like at all negative comments from anyone, any members of the public on this? I don't think I personally heard anything that was strongly negative. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss anything, and if so, that we incorporated it.
So we did start the meeting in public session with relation to the City of Yes, specifically to give the public any opportunity to voice concerns on any of the proposals. And we specifically asked, there were none from the community that were there. And so, you know, there were none that we needed to incorporate, but we did want to make sure that there was ample opportunity for the public to put forward any topics that were of concern.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. SLA.
So, yeah, I presided at SLA2. We heard a mess of applications, I think 11 or something like that altogether. We, one of them is going to come back this week. They have to be laid over. One of them we denied, the rest of them we approved. I wanted, before I talk about the denial, there are two in the approved category, just to mention there are, significant. Whitney Museum came back to change hours and method of operation on their locations. We approved everything they're asking for, except there was one part of it that they laid over because they wanted to consult with the community, and that had to do with trying to push the hours on the 6th floor terrace. 8th floor terrace, sorry. The other one was just so people know, because I know some sensitive subject in the past, the old Sushi Samba space that Greenwich House was trying to get for their program. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. We've approved folks to go in there for now. They got later hours than the community wanted, so there might be some people complaining about later hours. They're open till 12:30 and 2 on Friday and Saturdays. But they are a Japanese restaurant. It's sit down, legit sort of restaurant. There was some drama at the meeting about it, but we don't need to go into. The other piece I do think people need to know about, just FYI, because we probably will hear about the meeting, is the denial. It was for a place called While We Were Young, which is on West 10th Street in that little narrow piece between Bleecker and 7th. It's they're going to frame it as we're asking for something very reasonable. We want to be able to open our windows until a reasonable hour, like other people do in the neighborhood. But this narrative when we looked, which, came in seeming reasonable, but when we looked at it, it fell apart. Because from the beginning, there was, there was not public interest in having any license there. And the only way that they convinced the SLA to give a public, to find a public interest, was begging and pleading, was to square up and down, so they would never have anything but a fixed closed front and nothing outside. And then, not long after, they went ahead and installed an opening window in defiance of that. And then they, and by the way, then they came back to us at one point, I think, for a sidewalk. And then we said no. And then they, because of concern about the fact that they're under a fire escape, and they don't really have, then they, pandemic came, they put out under open restaurants, the sidewalk thing, and it completely violated all of the sidewalk rules about it. Including building a structure that blocks the fire escape egress. And the SLA found out that they had operable windows and were keeping them open. And threatened to take their license away. And they pleaded no contest and paid a large fine. And that keep the licenses on the promise that they would keep those windows sealed, which according to many neighbors, they have not followed. So when we looked at the history of adverse, actions, and the bottom line being that the initial finding of the SLA that they have since reiterated in their finding, and the twice finding of this full board, unanimous, I believe, actually, is that it's not in the public interest to have anybody at that location that has anything open or whatever because of the oversaturation already. And that's where we went. And I laid out because I think, the guy will probably be there. He has supporters who will be there. One of our fellow board members, Natasha, testified in his support. And so I thought we could do it there. So we have an action resolution on it that Bob wrote for us, because he's a public member of the community. So.
I have a question. Can I ask a question? I don't hear anybody. Okay, I'm hearing that I can ask a question. I live on West 10th Street. I live near there. I actually don't have a specific opinion about that bar, but I will tell you that as you approach West 10th Street, west of 7th Avenue, it's like, it's so noisy on that street. My question is, this is something that we raised years ago. The methods of operation are what determine when all of those bars and restaurants need to close their windows. Have you guys ever made any progress on how those methods of operation, how those STIPs can get posted? Because Wilfian now, Due West, all of those restaurants are insanely loud, especially since open restaurants. And, as a neighbor, you call 311, nothing happens. And of course, you feel like a jerk going in there and asking them to shut their windows or, ask what their methods of operation are. So I'm just wondering if there's any other way for a neighbor to find out what the STIPs are. Because I don't see the SLA itself doing anything to help neighbors know that.
So if you go on the SLA website on LAMP, I could send you a link for that, and you put in the address. The stipulations, they've been better with putting the stipulations in there. So some are in there, not all of them are in there, and not every stipulation is in there. So the other thing to do would be to check with the office, I guess, to see, or look through a past reso to do that. But LAMP has been putting more things in there. So you can find that.
Great, thank you. And if you would send me that link, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
The two spaces that you referenced have both been licensed for enough time that it is probably not on there. But we can send copies of the stipulations. So Due West is actually under the same corporate ownership as Diablo Royale was. So it's actually all the same things, even though it appears as a different window.
I'm not hearing you that well, but I think what I'm going to get from this is that offline, I will ask Mark for copies of the resos with the stipulations So at least I, as the in the know neighbor, can bitch at them. Thank you.
Are you done?
No, that's definitely one. No, right, Donna, that's what they want. And we had a slew of applications, the number laid over. But we heard 9 of them, and actually, I think we heard 11 of them. 2 of those laid over during the meeting to return next month with more information. And they took up a lot of time at this meeting, so hopefully they will just answer the questions and not take up a lot of time. At the next meeting, I don't think anything really stood out too much otherwise, so I think we should be okay. Good. Oh, but I do want to just say, can we talk offline about logistics for the meeting? Because to the point of whether we need printouts, we need to let the lawyers know sooner rather than later that it's going to be in person.
Absolutely.
Now,
And in general, anybody who has logistics questions about their meetings, or whether it's their next one or down the road, yeah, please reach out to me, to the office. We will work with you to fix the problems before they arise.
yeah, I mean, I'm just because I think mine is going to be the only one that is strictly in person and people are not going to be prepared for that. So I just did the lawyers especially need a blanket heads up on that.
Okay, no problem. Okay, human services.
Oh, that's me. We had a topic meeting, meaning a report with Greenwich House at the end of whatever that month was, May. And they talked about, you should read the report. They talk also about that they're going to co-locate all of their health and wellness stuff on the Mercer Street building, their methadone clinic. They're expanding their health offerings, and their administrative stuff is all going there. We have a meeting next week with the Salvation Army, because they are a large social service provider that is within our district, and I have never talked to anybody there. And we have a meeting scheduled or talked about for the end of July with Lenox Health Greenwich Village. I'm going to ask for a resolution on that one. We've heard really troubling reports about difficulties going from there to other hospitals that aren't Lenox Hill. And it's tricky to get at that information. I'm going to hope that we can post that early so that maybe people with experience with this can come and let us know what their experiences were. I mean, it's anecdotal information, but I know of at least 2 stories of people who had either had to wait hours and hours and hours before they could get to the hospital that they wanted to, unless they went to Lenox Hill. And we're not sure what the systematic problem is there. It might have to do, but anyway, that's a real problem. It's a real problem. And Wayne Coadler, who is on our committee and who also is LHGB, has been incredibly helpful on this. But I could see that not having an implication for our budget requests in the fall, but certainly a resolution, because that's not a good thing. And I will ask in the fall once again for a committee health, for a community health assessment, which we had soon after Bruden organization paid for it after St. Vincent's closed. It was a community health assessment to understand the role of the absence of St. Vincent's. And now that LHGV has been operating for 10 years or so, I mean, we ask for this every year. I don't know where to ask for it. We want a follow-up assessment to understand if this model works well, which I think in many ways it really does, or whether it doesn't work well, or where it doesn't work well. And that's all I have.
I don't see any questions, so quality of life.
Okay, so we had 8 street activity applications this month. Most of them actually ended up being denials. The most controversial one was this Mulberry event, which actually ended up being a success story for us. So they were going to have a basketball court on Mulberry Street, would have been extremely disruptive. We ended up getting them to move that. So they ended up moving it to Sarah D. Roosevelt Park, which was a much more appropriate place for it. So a number of local businesses showed up and community members and spoke in opposition to that. So we were able to have them move that. That was on June 10th, so it's already passed. Other than that, most of the miles are kind of the standard Gansevoort Plaza, purely commercial advertising events that now, as a rule, we're taking a stand against pretty much. There was one event that is commercial, but it's partnering with a local coffee shop and the Trevor Project, and it's Pride related, so we thought that one was okay. Hopefully, at the very least, if we keep taking these stands, we can at least get commercial. I think as long as the bid supports them, they're going to keep happening there. But hopefully we can maybe push people to do things that are a little bit more in partnership with the community and involving the community a bit more rather than just being a pure billboard. So we'll keep pushing on that. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. I will mention also just, I did testify on, at there was a city council hearing on the 5G towers. I testified simply paraphrasing the resolution that we already passed earlier this year. So that is now officially on the record with the city council.
Yes, Suzanne.
My question, thank you for that stance on the commercial activities at Gansevoort. I'm just wondering if you're getting any pushback from the bid, because when we raised it at one point with them, Jeffrey said, we do those activities so that we can get revenue to pay for more community-minded activities, which is, it's an issue, it's a conflict, right? And I just wonder if you've had any push as you've started to take a more consistent stance against these commercial activities, if you're getting any pushback from the bid. I guess that's my question.
I have not been getting any pushback because I think they just work directly with SLA kind of regardless of our resolution. So they're able to hold those events anyhow. It might be worth having a conversation with them and just say, look, if these are going to happen, we want to try to make sure there's a little bit more of a community tie. So that might be something that we can look into.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Parks. Anybody here for the park? No, okay.
I'm here for parks. I mean, I wasn't planning on doing a presentation, but I know what the resolutions are going to be about. There's going to be a resolution asking for consistent support of consistent enforcement of park regulations, skateboarding, selling weed, that kind of thing. There is going to be a resolution supporting the dual role that the administrator of the park has. Will Morrison, like his two predecessors, George Vilanicus and Sarah Nielsen, since the establishment of the Conservancy 10 years ago, they've been asked to play a dual role. So they are the administrator of the park and they are also the ED of the Conservancy. 10 years ago, when this was proposed, the Parks Department said, we want this to happen to ensure that the private entity is not working at odds with the public Parks Department. There were some people in the audience, there's especially one woman who's very avid about this, who feels that it's actually works against the public, that it's allowing the Conservancy to have sort of, a way of having a way in to the Parks Department and have undue influence. So 10 years ago, we established all kinds of expectations from the Conservancy of good governance and transparency and all that kind of stuff. Will Morrison has been at the park as an administrator for a while. He is now coming to play this dual role. So they came before us with that, which we are supporting. We figure that 10 years of the operation of the Conservancy has shown that it actually is doing a great job and that the public has been very well served. And then there's one other topic that I can't remember. Oh, yes, it's the resurfacing of Pasanante on 6th Avenue and Houston Street. That is long overdue. And the big issue there, besides the fact that the schools are going to be without a field for 4 months, we don't know when the job is starting. The big issue there, what's happening with many of our parks now, is that there's a lot of conflict of who gets to play what. There's a big surge in pickleball, which is great, but there are also roller hockey players, and there are basketball players. There is permitted time and not permitted time. And so the challenge for the Parks Department, which we are enforcing or encouraging, is to find a balance to allow all those conflicting uses happen at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. Economic development. Sure.
We did not meet this month and we are not meeting until September, where we will cover office vacancy. And that's some good speakers like that.
Traffic and transportation.
The Federal Highway Administration has approved the final environmental assessment for congestion pricing and also has released the draft FONSI, which is the finding of no significant impact, which really means that they're moving ahead. It's going to be at a slow pace anyhow, but they are moving ahead with congestion pricing. And we thought it would be a good idea to have a Q&A session and had somebody from Congressman Golden's office, and also an analyst, a traffic analyst, to answer questions. I don't know how well the questions were answered, but I will tell you that there were a lot of questions and that they reflected a number of concerns. And we are doing a report, which we will submit to the Traffic Mobility Review Board, which is the entity that is going to develop all the recommendations on the exemptions, on the tolls, on variations, and also the Tri-Borough Bridge and Tunnel Authority. And there will be a hearing eventually, and we will then have a hearing to have people really voice their feelings, and we will do a resolution at the time. I'd just like to tell you a few of these issues that were brought up. It was really some numerous ones. So this is just the headings from our report. Charging congestion zone residents, boundaries, impact of congestion pricing in Community Board 2, Manhattan. In other words, on residents, on businesses and so forth. Mitigation of existing impacts by congestion pricing, special discounts, exemptions for those with physical challenges. Hold on, I'll let you page. The tax credit for residents in the congestion zone earning under $60,000 a year, differences in time of day and week charges, the physical infrastructure. In other words, what kind of infrastructure is going to be placed to keep track of the cars and vehicles entering the congestion zone. Pass-alongs, that is, for instance, the deliveries, which will then charge extra for the toll. Okay, congestion piling up outside the CBD, how is that going to be handled? And there were all kinds of miscellaneous other questions as well. There will be links to some of the reports that will be, I think, useful for people to look at and learn a little more. That will be in the report too, which will be at the full board meeting. And that's about the size of it.
Thank you. Arts and institution. Oh, there was a question, I'm sorry. Oh, I just called for it. So we.
There's a question?
No, we're fine, Shirley. We're setting up for arts and institutions.
We had a meeting with somebody from the NYSLU we're at a exhibit on Lafayette Street, and so basically they laid out in the meeting that how the city budgets about $10 billion in police, and the second expense is for homeless service, which is 2 point. So he
It's really, really hard to hear what you're saying.
We have a guest, Jared Trujillo from NYCLU come to present. And he gave us a breakdown on how much we spend in the police, which is like $29 million a day, which ends up being about $10 billion of the city budget. And the second closest to that is a $2.2 billion in for homeless services. Within that budget, we discussed about the impact of the new jail being built. And sorry, so that was kind of an interesting, information about how much the second tier, which is a $2.2 billion in homeless services the city spend for our human service group. We also talked about the temporary installations that are gonna happen in Washington Square. We have a guest coming next meeting. And we talked about our request to get a little bit more geared up for the budget requests for our city.
Yeah, I can certainly do that now. After a lot of thought, and wanting Ivy to be able to focus on the arts side of arts and institutions, I decided that the institutions component is going to be separated out. It's going to join what was Valerie's committee. Valerie's committee is now economic development in institutions. And Ivy is now going to focus on arts and culture. That's it. Yes.
Should I be updating the website to reflect those names and,
Yeah, I have, yes, it will be, and I will have to give you the breakdown of the names of the people on it.
oh, thank you. Okay, great.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so, we have cannabis licensing.
Yeah, so you guys can hear me okay? Cheryl Wu here. I'm reporting on behalf of Mara Fitzgerald. So we had one application for actually an operation. The card holder Union Square Travel Agency, they were approved for a card license back in December, and they had come in because they want to expand their storefront from 62 East 13th Street into the connected larger space at 835 Broadway. And their application asked for a patron entrance also on the side of Broadway. So the CEO and the president came and, presented their deck with the designs, which looks great. It's a circular area that's gonna allow people to queue up. And also there's a flower area, like a display. It looks great. So they also talked about their experience within the neighborhood. Seems like everything's going well. Their construction's already underway. And we do expect that their presence will hopefully benefit the area with more security and probably better visibility. So, we voted pretty much denying unless, so approval, and it was unanimous. So.
Yes, it's beautiful. They have a beautiful retail.
Yep.
And now equity, race, and justice.
I don't think we had a
You
meeting.
didn't have a meeting, so unless there's something, okay, I don't see anything, and then schools.
Official Larry here, we had a presentation from Literacy Academy Collective, which supports the public schools to bring evidence-based literacy instruction into the classroom. We heard from Emily Hellstrom, who is the co-founder of Literacy Academy Collective, where he discussed the current literacy landscape of NYC with a specific emphasis on the literacy rates of Black, Brown, and dyslexic students. She highlighted the challenges faced by dyslexic students and the slow progress in teacher training and the adoption of evidence-based practices. The low literacy rates in New York City have emerged as a civil concern, contributing to the school building pipeline. This issue must be addressed, proactively addressed. I found this statistic interesting, so I'm going to share it here. NYC state test data, most recently in 2022, shows that 51% of the city's 3rd through 8th grade students did not score proficient on reading, with significant disparities by rate. 30% of Asian students are not proficient in reading, 33% of white students not proficient, 63% of Latino students, and 64% of Black students. Yeah. So the committee wrote a resolution to support urging the DOE to fully support the LAC for an expanded program, so the district also calls for the creation of dyslexic focused public school program and cinema schools across the borough. They're also opening up a new, South Bronx Literacy Academy, which specializes in dyslexia. It's the only one, in the city. Or just, and that's it. Great. I don't see any questions, so I guess the next, oh, I'm sorry.
Is there a resolution?
Yes, yeah, me. There is. Okay, those are our committee reports. Is there any new business?
Two things. One, we would save a lot of time in our committee meetings if the committee chairs of the board office presented past resolutions on issues that we hear contemporarily, whether things can change. I just noticed, because I've looked them up, we spend a significant amount of time. And as we go back, that really saves and prevents more time understanding the historical position. And like for land use, landmarks, whatever the nation reports are beforehand. But we generally are starting with something new on many of our licensing applications. This would be very helpful as people don't have to regurgitate the past over and over. People who've had it in front of them. And then number two, and I don't know where the appropriate place to bring this up is, but the Zoom webinars are a terrible format. And now that we're going to hybrid, can we go to Zoom meetings where everybody appears in person, because there's an unequal position for members of the public who can't be viewed when we have people present in the room, but you can't see them on the video screen during the meeting. And the board raised this as a huge issue in the beginning of COVID during the snow home rezoning. Very important. And I have frankly been embarrassed when I've been stopped by members of the public on the street who know us as board members or myself personally, and I don't recognize them because they're not on the screens. And if we had in-person meetings, we would know our community. And they also don't know each other. So when people come to meetings to testify, they don't necessarily know each other, what they look like. And so when they're walking down the street. And so while it may not be something for this month, it's an important part of who is our community and we know each other. And we are the lowest level government. I just think that that's something we should strive for. And many of the other groups, for example, the community council meetings are all done this way where people can be there. It's not complicated, but it's something I think we should strive for if hybrid is going to be a model that we're going to continue doing.
We will definitely, yeah.
With respect to that, one of the reasons why all of us back in March of 2020 were encouraged to use webinars rather than meetings was because at that time, the webinar was a lot less vulnerable to Zoom bombing than meetings were. Now that may have changed. And so the first thing I'll do tomorrow is contact our friends at Beta NYC, who are the ones who gave us that advice for these.
I mean, we glad on this issue. We had the second Zoom meeting in the city. That in fact is one of the biggest meetings. We know that. But the issue now is you can just click, turn off the camera before we're starting the meeting. It's not complicated. And they do it regularly through all kinds of meetings. And it's just the protection at the expense of people participating, I think is now long past.
Heidi, do you have a question?
I just wanted to say that in our website, it says that for the in-person meeting, that we have to wear masks. That's not the case. We should get out to the people because they're all.
Thank you.
Yes, Valerie.
I agree with that idea about the making it the meeting format, and I think it's good to hear what Beta NYC's position is on it. So I think we should share that with us. But I also think that we should lead on this as well. And I think that just be about assigning someone on the committee to kind of be that kind of enforcer you know, whether they're in the room and kind of have a laptop and are kind of, that's their job during the meeting, is gives somebody else in the committee something to do, and it's,
Right. Just to that point, also, the other thing that happens is we're constantly raising and lowering people, and at the latest, they lose the chat, they lose a lot coming and going.
So clearly there's a benefit, yeah, for that, we will see, so yeah, unless there's some compelling reason not to, yeah, we will move in that direction. But yeah,
Since we have, we've spent 2 hours already, and we only have an extra hour for our meeting on Thursday, everyone please scribble down, say a short statement, say it once, don't repeat yourself. Otherwise,
yeah, as I said earlier, yes, we have a hard stop time. If need be, I'm going to have, if I have to move the business session up and have the public session later, that is what I will do, because we have to get through the business session. But yes, I am going to, I would appreciate, you know, people being concise and, you know, and mindful. Yes.
Should I reach out to the staffs of elected officials and kind of say the same thing, or do you want to?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes, no electeds.
well, I already know Brian Kavanaugh's coming, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that will help, and
make
yeah,
sure
and it will
someone's
do,
doing a timer.
you know, it's actually looking for an excuse to tell them to shut up. It's like the one and only opportunity I may ever get.
Yeah.
So, if there is no more new business, a motion to adjourn. I'm sorry. Oh, I. Yes, there will, yeah, that will be, for everyone. And by the way, speaking of that, there will be, a memorial service about 6 months from now, which, as we get information. So seeing that, and I'm assuming that that motion was made and seconded and everybody said yes.
Thank you.
Yes, as soon as I.